Fantastic. Hopefully you've all made a new pal. I'd love to encourage you to stay on your feet. We're going to remain standing to honour the word. So we're going to jump into scripture together. So if you've got a Bible with you and you want to read along, we're in Revelation chapter 2, reading from verse 8. And if you're reading in the Bibles, you can grab at the back. We're on page 1029. And it says, "To the church in Smyrna, and to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are synagogues to Satan. Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And the one who conquers will not be hurt by second death." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks, Katie. Alrighty, let's. You may take your seat, or you can stand. It's up to you. But we're gonna have a brief recap of the letter of Revelation. We started 2 weeks ago, so if you weren't here, I want you to feel like you're part of this, or maybe you forgot or fell asleep. But I hope you didn't. So the Apostle John, he is in his mid-80s, and he's imprisoned on the island of Patmos, which is off the coast of modern Turkey. The reason he is there is because of his unwavering faith to Jesus and his reluctance to worship Emperor Domitian as a god. So they throw him in jail. He ends up on an island. Now, while on Patmos, Jesus gives John a fresh revelation of himself and includes 7 letters to 7 different churches in Asia Minor. And he wants to encourage and he wants to correct them. Now, last week, Katie shared on the church in Ephesus who had forgotten their first love. And this week, we are looking at the city of Smyrna. Now, Smyrna was called the crown or the flower of Asia. It was known as a really lovely place. It actually still exists today. I didn't know this. It exists today called Izmir. I think that's how you pronounce it, in Turkey today. Smyrna rivaled Ephesus as the first city of Asia. So my church is better than Katie's from last week. And they rivaled them. And on their coins were stamped the words, "First city of Asia in size and beauty." First, the word first was a word that the city really loved. Smyrna had gone through quite a few different resurrection moments. The city was torn down, it was built up, it was torn down. And in 1580 it was torn down and then rebuilt in 290 BC. And the city were really proud of their resurrection, that they had come back to life. So Jesus is essentially, when he's speaking to them, he's meeting them where they're at. And he begins by saying, I love it, Jesus is so clever. He says, well, I know how you think. And he goes, the first, he caught them there, the first and the last who became dead and has come to life. That's how he starts. And why he does this is because he sees them. He sees what they value. He knows who they are. And when this was being read out loud, because this letter was made to be read out loud to the churches, as it was being read, I have no doubt that it caught their attention. And whilst it was getting their attention, what Jesus is telling them is that actually, that their lives should not be governed by Caesar, but they should be governed by him. That Caesar was not God, that he was God. He was first, not Caesar. So Jesus got their attention, and then he carries on by saying, I know about your troubles and your poverty, and then in brackets, but you are rich, and then the lies of those who say they are Jews but are not. They are the synagogue of Satan. Quite rough, right? Now the Greek word for trouble is klipsis. Can you say that? Klipsis. Yeah, give it a go. Klipsis. Beautiful word, right? We won't use it too much, but essentially klipsis, the Greek word, means crushing pressure. Crushing pressure. So the people back then, the way that they would have thought about it is someone slowly being crushed to death by a heavy rock. That is how they would have perceived the word klipsis. So the disciples in Smyrna were living their faith under crushing pressure, under klipsis. Now the word klipsis is very specific. When we talk about this crushing pressure, it doesn't talk about our everyday regular kind of pain or pressure that we're facing. Like in our friendships, there's pressure in my friendships. There's pressure from my partner. There's pressure from my lecturer who's giving me too much work to study for my exam. The pressure in my job, pressure I'm not getting enough sleep. I'm pressured by all these things of London. That's not the pressure that they are referring to. When we hear the word klipsis, it's referring to the pressure that comes against God's kingdom. It's one when God's kingdom clashes against human kingdoms. This kind of pressure is felt when the light clashes with the darkness, when justice meets injustice and life encounters death. Jesus says that he knows their pressure. He meets them with that. He says, I know your pressure. But what's really important is that Jesus doesn't follow up with something that the people of Smyrna were hoping they would say, and probably what we would hope. He doesn't actually go on to say, well, I know you're suffering with pressure, and I'm going to make sure that you don't suffer with that anymore. He doesn't say that. I don't know about you, but if Jesus was writing to me, I would hope that he would want to lift the pressure. But he doesn't say that. The reality is that following Jesus means that we're going to experience crushing pressure. Fun, right? Lauren's laughing. It was fun, yeah. So Darren, 2 weeks ago, he taught on Revelation chapter 1. And John writes in verse 1 to 9, he says, I, John, your brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation and kingdom and perseverance that are in Jesus. So John uses three really important words and he ties them together. He uses the word tribulation, kingdom, and perseverance. So to follow Jesus in a nutshell, if you didn't know this, means being part of God's kingdom, which naturally brings about tribulation as the kingdom decides to break in. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer and be like, if you're following Jesus, it's all going to be hard. No, it's not. Like, being part of the kingdom of God is amazing. Like, there's joy, there's grace, there's freedom, there's love. There's a bunch of amazing people that you meet who are also following Jesus. Like, there are so many good things that following Jesus, people who follow Jesus are known for, but also what it feels like to be in an amazing kingdom. But the thing is as long as there is resistance to the kingdom of God, following Jesus means that we will be under pressure. So there will be good and there will be bad. Now think about it. When light shines in the darkness, darkness has two choices. The first choice is that darkness can bow down before light and say, do whatever you want. Or the second one is that darkness will choose to try to put out the light. It'll try its best to overcome it. So the lampstand, we would have heard this in Revelation 1, but the lampstands that we hear, the lampstand of the church of Smyrna was shining really brightly in the city. The darkness of the city could not stand the light of the kingdom of God. So the lampstand itself felt pressure. The church of Smyrna felt the pressure, the crushing pressure. Okay, Dylan, you've spoken a lot about pressure, but what pressure? What is this pressure? Well, why were they under such intense pressure? What did they do to bring pressure on themselves? Did they upset God? Did they make him angry? Did they annoy somebody else? Had they done something wrong like the Ephesians church? Did they not forget their first love? They didn't do anything wrong. They were not perfect, like no one's perfect, but this church Jesus wasn't correcting them. And that was the point. They were passionately and faithfully following Jesus. They were fully committed to the kingdom of God. They were sold out. And as a result, they came under this crushing pressure. So I want to take a look today. I want to have a look at the different pressure that they were experiencing and how this letter of Revelation is actually, or this part of the text is relevant to us. So I want to look at three of them. Two of them are visible pressures, and one of them is an invisible pressure. So the first pressure that they were experiencing was the loyalty to Rome. So the first visible pressure that we see was Smyrna's loyalty. They were the same way you have Swifties to Taylor Swift. The people of Smyrna were that to Rome. They were the Swifties of Rome. Big fans, loved them. They lived by the motto, Rome first in all things. If they had tattoos, it was probably in places where you could see and maybe not see, but Rome was number one. Even before Rome was recognized as a powerhouse, they had dedicated a temple to the Roman goddess Dea Roma. And then even when Rome took over, they started putting in bids to have other temples and have other places built there because they were so sold out for Rome. So that was the first one. They had a loyalty to Rome, the Swifties of Rome. The second one, that the pressure that they were feeling, and it ties a little bit to, not a little bit, it actually ties a lot to the first one, but there were certain Jewish people at the time who were living in Smyrna that were applying a bit of pressure. So the Jewish people in this time had it good. It was not good, but it was better than what a lot of other people had. Under Roman law, Jews were very lucky to not have to make sacrifices to Caesar. They didn't have to enlist in the military service, so no conscription, lovely, stay at home, and they didn't have to worship Caesar. They could freely worship God however they wanted and whenever they pleased. However, that privilege could be taken away at a moment's notice. So they were very nervous if anything was going to come and affect that. So when Christians started to refuse worshiping Caesar, these Jewish people started to become a little bit anxious that they could lose their privileges. Leaders of the state began seeing Christians as part of the Jewish community, and they were starting to kind of like associate them. And then certain Jewish people were going, no, we don't want that. So what they did to show their loyalty to Rome, but probably most of all to protect their own skin, they snitched on the Christians. And they said, hey, no, these guys aren't part of our thing. They should be worshiping Caesar. And this is why Jesus uses the phrase a synagogue of Satan. Imagine being called like you're the church of Satan. That's horrible, man. But those Jewish people who betrayed the Christians were no longer worthy of the title synagogue of the Lord. So there were two visible pressures. So these two visible pressures are why Jesus makes reference to, when we read earlier, the poverty of the church in Smyrna. Smyrna was a very wealthy city, wasn't poor by any means, and no one in that city should have actually been poor. Everyone should have been really well off. But the Christians were poor, not because they decided they were not going to conform to the pressure. They were not going to actually worship Caesar the same way everyone else was doing. So in their businesses, in the way that they did life, they chose to do it in Jesus' way. And as a result, those who resisted Jesus' way, those were the Romans and Jewish circles, refused to do business with the Christians. They refused to engage with them. And this left them ostracized, and this left probably a bit of boycotting. And their shops were taken, homes were ransacked, they were denied employment. It left them poor in a city that was full of wealth. No one wanted to associate themselves with them. So those are the first two, the visible pressures. Then we have a third pressure. And this is an invisible one. And I'd argue that it's the main one that not only they faced, but I think that we face today. We see Jesus say, the devil will throw some of you into prison. So what does Jesus mean by the devil will throw some of you into prison? Like, how could the devil throw someone into prison? He's like, I can't see him. Like, if TikTok was a thing back then, we would probably see a video of a bunch of Roman soldiers grabbing Christians, getting ready to throw them into jail with a bunch of religious leaders cheering and getting really excited. And while you're watching the video, you don't see the devil. You don't see him anywhere. You're only seeing people. So what does Jesus mean then? But the devil will throw some of you into prison. Well, Jesus is pretty much what he's saying is that things are not as they seem. There is more to reality than what meets our earthly eyes. Jesus is trying to help the church in Smyrna see the full picture. So behind the visible pressures was the power of evil trying to destroy Jesus and everything that he had made and created. And what Jesus is trying to do in teaching to the I want to say the Smyrnaeans or Smurfs, but that's not how it is. But the people of Smyrna is reminding them and reminding us that the real enemy is spiritual. In our day and age, talking about the devil or Satan and evil forces isn't like a super popular. How many of you are often having those conversations? Yeah. Fair, some Darren and some like that. The good statistic. It's not really something that comes up in my daily conversation, especially when I talk about God. I'm talking about like all the nice things of the kingdom and Jesus. But when I do bring it up and I do talk about it, and for the 3 hands that went up, I don't know when you chat about it. People start to look uncomfortable, and they're like, oh, I can't believe they're talking about that. Or they look at me blankly, and they go, what the hell are you talking about? The reality is that with Satan, we can't cut him out of the pages of the Bible, and we can't cut him out of the pages of our world and our history. Jesus himself spoke about the devil, and he spoke about him quite often. We see he even met up against him. We see him in the desert. He was tempted by the devil himself. The truth is that we can't fully understand or appreciate Jesus' life on earth or his ministry or what he did on the cross without that part of the story. The whole mission of Jesus involved confronting and defeating Satan, defeating death. Paul told the Ephesians, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. There are evil forces at play. And the devil, or Satan, whatever you want to call him, is the puppet master of all of them. He's controlling them. The devil's main target is Jesus. He doesn't really care about us. Jesus cares about us. He doesn't care about us. But since Jesus defeated Satan on the cross and rose from the dead, Satan can no longer hurt Jesus. He can't win there. Jesus has won. He's victorious all the time. That's good news for us. And because he can't hurt Jesus, the devil goes to his next best plan, is to attack what is dearest to him, which is the church, which is you, which is me, us sitting here right now. And I believe that this invisible pressure is what we face the most today. To be honest, in this service, I don't really think that we're struggling with poverty and persecution. And if there are some of you that, I'm sorry to generalize, but I don't think that we're sitting in central London that we are really struggling with that. I mean, here in London, a recent study, we refer to it quite often, the Talking Jesus study, 1 in 3 people in London are willing to hear about Jesus. They're willing to have a conversation. Nobody's persecuting us for our faith. Otherwise, we would not be in here with open doors right now. We'd be meeting underground, probably beneath the crypt. And poverty, I don't think here is a result because of our faith. I think it's because of other societal issues, other things that are going on. What we're struggling with today in 2024 in East London are the evil forces of this world. Here in East London, we encounter the pressure of the devil and evil forces like Smyrna did, but I think we do in a bit of a different way, not so much the same. We aren't being thrown into prison or we're being killed. I think what's happening to us is the devil and his evil forces are trying to make us believe he doesn't exist. And this is really evident. Either we've never been taught about it, like just to show, humor me for this exercise. Like, has anyone been taught about Satan or the devil? Has anyone just to raise it? This is not a trick question. I'm not. Some of us think it's utter nonsense. Maybe I won't get you to put your hand up there. We don't want to, maybe some of us, who's scared to talk about the devil? Is anyone scared about it? Okay, good to know. But some of us believe, and this is the one that I've been guilty of in my past, is I think that by giving acknowledgement and or that I'm having conversations about the devil, it feels like, I'm giving him too much power, or I'm glorifying him, like I shouldn't be talking about him. He has no room here. But I think this is exactly what the enemy is trying to do. This is his tactic, and it's a clever one. To push us into the place of unawareness and complacency so that the kingdom of God's walls stay where they are and the gates remain shut. He does not want to see the renewal of East London and the rest of our world. He doesn't want to see God's kingdom reign here on earth. He doesn't want to see people encounter the love of Jesus and be set free. C.S. Lewis, who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia, who's watched that? Good set of movies, isn't it? Or read the books. C.S. Lewis, he wrote a book, it'll pop up on the screen. It's called The Screwtape Letters. Now, if you don't know, he basically wrote this book that was to defend the Christian faith. And he wrote this book of 31 letters where a senior demon is talking, or devil, is talking to a younger devil who's learning the ropes of what it means to kind of lead people to hell. So he's written it from a reverse point of view. So Screwtape is the uncle's name, the older devil. He's experienced. He writes 31 letters to his nephew Wormwood. And he's been Wormwood has been given an assignment. He's been given they call them patience, and he's to build a pathway to guide this guy towards hell. So in the first letter of the 31, Screwtape writes to his young nephew, and he says, basically he advises him on how to steer him away from Jesus, away from Christianity. And he says to his nephew not to rely on logic, but rather to keep the patient distracted and confused. It's better to keep, this is what really struck me. It's better to keep the patient absorbed in ordinary matters so he doesn't start thinking about higher truths. I want to read that again. It's better to keep the patient absorbed in ordinary matters so he doesn't think about higher truths. And I think that is exactly what the enemy, amongst other things, is trying to do today, to keep us so focused on the ordinary things of life where we don't acknowledge the higher powers at work, whether that be good or whether that be evil. If he can get us to become unaware of his presence, then why on earth do we need to worry about the kingdom of God? There's no point. The reality is that we aren't being persecuted, we aren't being killed, we aren't being slandered, we aren't suffering from poverty for our faith. Quite frankly, I don't feel, like I said, it's relevant to any of us that much. It's not like our brothers and sisters maybe in Smyrna back in the day, or in China at the moment, or India or Iran. They are suffering persecution for their faith. And whilst it doesn't feel relevant to us, that in itself becomes one of the biggest dangers to threaten us as a church in East London. We believe that nothing is coming up against us, which leaves us complacent in our faith with no sense of urgency to seek out God and his kingdom. It says in Colossians that when we follow Jesus, we're actually transferred into the kingdom of God. We live in his kingdom where we get to accept that he is enthroned, that he is king, and we get to play our part in that expansion so that others too will have the honor and the privilege of it being adopted into God's family and encounter God's love for themselves. They have a place in the kingdom to dwell. So when we start following Jesus and playing our part in the renewal of this world, there's no doubt in my mind that darkness will push back against it. It will fight. I don't think the enemy wants to sit back and allow the kingdom of God to advance. And all that I'm trying to do today is to open your eyes and my eyes to what Jesus is saying in this passage, that there are spiritual forces at play, evil ones. Satan will try to pull the wool over your eyes and make you believe that he isn't around. Or when you eventually do become aware, he will then begin to fight back. So I'm sorry if you have now become aware, because get ready, the enemy's going to try. But you're okay. Jesus got it under control, and we'll talk more about that. But he will target the church. He will target you and me. He will target Jesus' most prized possession. Now, I don't say all of these things to scare you, and I don't think you're scared because none of you raised your hands for you were scared about it in conversation. But I'm wanting to say this to make you aware and to prepare you for what is to come. I don't think we can follow Jesus and live in his kingdom without knowing what we are up against. I would be a bad pastor, I would be a bad friend, I'd be a bad fellow Christian if I just didn't tell anybody. It's like me sending you to the Cotswolds, the middle of the Cotswolds, to live there with dinosaurs roaming around, and I give you a broom to defend yourself. That's what it's like if I didn't warn you right now. I thought that would be a lot funnier. It's not, but that's okay. I worked really hard at that one. Anyway, so there are evil forces. I'm still holding the broom. There are evil forces at play, and we need to become aware of them. And when we become aware of the evil and the darkness around us, it does two things. So the first thing that it does is that it makes us appreciate Jesus' victory on the cross. Last week, I made a joke in the first serve. Well, I didn't make a joke. People just started laughing. But normally, we only really cheer when we say Jesus is risen on Easter, right? But when we talk about Jesus is risen in other times, everyone just sits there. And I'm guilty too, I just sit there. But it's like on Easter, we have the excuse of all cheering. But it's like, we need to talk about the victory on the cross. Like, that is what our faith hinges on. So it wouldn't make sense if Jesus won by dying it wouldn't make sense for Jesus to win by dying on the cross if he didn't defeat something. Like, have any of you ever watched sport where someone doesn't verse someone? Like, I know you get individual sports, but usually there's competition. Like, you can't win against someone if there's no one. It's like me saying to Darren, go run the 100-meter, and he wins the gold, but he's the only one that ran the race. Like, that doesn't count. It doesn't matter. He didn't actually win. He just ran a race. Just ran in a line. Recognizing that helps us. Like, if we can recognize that there's that Jesus has won, what he did on the cross, it helps us to fully embrace and to understand the magnitude of that. We get to appreciate it more and more and more. The second thing that it does when we become aware of the evil and we become aware of the darkness is it invites pressure. I've mentioned that already. It invites pressure. But following Jesus and being aware of the evil around us invites its own set of challenges. The he's not happy. He's not happy. He does not want to see the kingdom of God expand. He wants his kingdom of darkness to reign, and he wants citizens for that. So naturally it invites pressure. So I don't know which kingdom you want to be in. If you want to be in God's kingdom or if you want to be in the kingdom of darkness. I know where I want to be. So now we're aware, right? We've become aware. I've made you aware, or Jesus made you aware. I just get to say it again. But we've become aware that there are evil forces and there's darkness and there's stuff going on. So what does Jesus ask of us in light of that? Well, he gives us two commands. He says, do not be afraid and be faithful. Do not be afraid and be faithful. What he's essentially saying is faith over fear. He's saying have faith over fear. And he gives us 4 ways to adopt a posture of faith over fear when we're under pressure. Right, let's go through 4 of these and then we'll probably start wrapping up. So number 1, don't panic when the darkness has come out, which you guys are doing really well at. I haven't seen any of you panic since I've been talking about this. But as we get closer to Jesus, his kingdom will grow wherever we go. And the enemy will resist. every single time. The Christians in Smyrna faced trouble because they were faithful. So don't panic when the pressure comes. It's part of the journey. And Jesus, as the light, is with you. So you're sorted. You have the best person for the job next to you. So be aware, the darkness, it will come. The second one, you may be tested. I love this, you may be tested. I'm glad it's not like you are going to be tested. You may be tested. Jesus says the devil will throw some of you into prison that you may be tested. So the devil has a purpose for this pressure that he's brought about. But so does Jesus. I love what Jesus does. Jesus allows this pressure to test us. And the word for test that he uses here, it means two things. It means to prove and to improve. Jesus' enemy is doing his best to tempt his disciples to lose their faith. But Jesus takes that temptation and he flips it around. And he uses it to prove and to improve their faith. God uses all things together for the good, works all things together for those who love him. Pressure refines us. Same way with diamond. Pressure refines us. It strips away the excess baggage of sin. It brings us closer to Jesus, who is our only security and hope. And remembering that this is only a test. It's only a test. Can really help us to persevere, and that we're not alone in this. Tests don't have an infinite ending. Like when you've written a test or exam, it ends sooner or later, whether you finish the test or not. It finishes, so you can have hope that the test will finish. Persevere, and that we aren't alone in this. We have the Holy Spirit alongside of us. Even when we're walking through the valley of the shadow of death, he is alongside us. Number 3, Jesus has the final authority over the pressure. He says to the church in Smyrna, you will have tribulation for 10 days. And this could mean a literal 10 days, or it could mean a short period of time. In this day, same with the number 7, some people believe that the number 10 stood for like human completion. It was a really complete number. So 10 days of hlipsis could mean a complete trial. But regardless of all of that, what Jesus is trying to say is that he is in control. Regardless, he is in control. He has the final authority. But there will be evil forces. But they're limited by God. They're on a leash. He's got them on a leash. Can't go any further than they can. The pressure has a limit. And as I share the fourth one with you, I'm going to invite the band to come up so long. But Jesus makes us promises. And he says, one of the promises he talks about is the crown of life. So Jesus promises those who endure will receive the crown of life. In Smyrna, they regularly held like athletic games. It was famous throughout Asia. They wanted to be number one in that too. And those who were finished a race, if you've watched any like Roman movies or Gladiator, you know like the wreaths that they get when they win and they put around their ears and stick out like that. They're known as a Stephanos, and that was the victor's crown. So you got one of those if you finished the race. And Jesus is saying like, hey, I'm going to give you a crown of life when you finish this race. And the second thing is his immunity from second death. Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. When I watch TV shows, when people ever have the opportunity to wish, they want to be immortal. So when I read this and it's actually possible, we will have eternal life. Jesus promises that those who overcome shall not be hurt by the second death. The first death that we experience is a physical death, which we all face. Sorry to give you a spoiler. You will die, and so will I. But the second death is an eternal separation from God. And he's saying those who stay faithful through the first death will not face the second. They will enter into eternal life. They will die once. There was a pastor in Los Angeles, E.V. Hill. He says, those who are born once die twice, and those who are born twice die once. And I don't know about you, I'm into dying just once. I haven't experienced it yet, but I just want to do it once. The disciples in Smyrna overcame fear, and they kept their faith. And we know this because the 7 churches that Jesus talked to, only Smyrna's church still exists today. Today, Smyrna is called Izmir, and it's a lively center for Eastern Orthodox Christianity and worship and education. And for the last 19 centuries, the pressure on the disciples there has rarely been eased, but their strength has rarely been faded. So my question to you is, do we want to become aware of what's going on around us? Will we choose to stand strong under the crushing pressure of the enemy? Are we ready to follow Jesus Because if we've said, yes, we want to follow Jesus, that doesn't mean that when you follow, you get up and you go. We don't get to sit and become complacent. Are you ready to follow Jesus and see his kingdom reign? Because if you are, I just want to tell you, buckle up. Get ready, because the enemy's not going to like that. He's going to come against you. But let me encourage you. He is shaking in his boots because Jesus has won and will keep winning. The kingdom of God will prevail. And we have the privilege of being in that.